What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, August 21st, and we are another day closer to football season. Today, we're going to continue our position-by-position breakdown of Baylor's entire football team by discussing the interior linebackers. Grayson, new and old faces, but primarily we're going to be talking about two guys. That's Matt Jones, who's returning as a starter at Mike, and a newcomer in Keaton Thomas, a junior college transfer who will play alongside him at will. Both of these guys, big playmakers, but both of them have a lot to prove. Kind of Matt Jones being, let's build on a decent year last year as a playmaker that you need to correct a lot of things. And with Keaton Thomas, you're coming up from junior college. You had a massive year in your 1 year in junior college, but now can it translate to this level of football?
Definitely. And this is one of those where it feels like everyone has just been trying to, fill in for what Terrell Bernard and Dylan Doyle did for Baylor for those few years in there. And it's really hard to do. I mean, those guys were really, really good players for Baylor. Obviously, Terrell Bernard is in all time, Baylor great, obviously a great NFL player as well. And so I think everyone just felt like, okay, so this is just going to continue. And last year, the transfer they brought in, Mike Smith, went down with injury 4 games into the season. So didn't get to see kind of, what he could have maybe turned into. And Matt Jones, while he didn't have a great year, I think statistically, people would probably be surprised. It was his best year. And so I think it just was one of those things where the defense was so bad that we didn't really get to highlight, that Matt Jones did take a step forward from what he had done in seasons past. So I think it's a lot of that, especially for Baylor fans, just this expectation that the linebackers were going to be a lot better. And then obviously last year that didn't quite happen. But I think there's a lot of optimism about this group going into this season, especially with the addition of Keaton Thomas.
Yeah, if you remember last year, Mike Smith and Matt Jones were like, even until in fall camp, they were like switching back and forth on who was playing Mike, who was playing Will. And I don't know ultimately if that was a good thing, because I think both of them more trended towards a Mike and not necessarily a Will. And Mike Smith ended up playing Will, didn't stay healthy, gets hurt, 6 games into the year. Matt finished with 11.5 tackles for loss last year. For the career, he has 24.5 tackles for loss. Like, this is a guy that's productive and is probably better suited for the Mike linebacker position, more athletic than Dylan Doyle, I would say. But maybe he just hasn't clicked all the way in terms of playing the middle linebacker position. This will be the first offseason that he's had where he's played the same position entirely for a full offseason playing the Mike linebacker position after playing it last year. I think that can only help him going into the super senior season.
Definitely. Yeah, he finished with 82 tackles as well, which was a career high. So he really he performed. He did everything he could, and consistency wise, it still wasn't there. But that tends to happen when you're on a bad team. You're just going to have moments where you're just struggling and everyone's struggling. But I do think, Matt's a very athletic guy, and he played Jack for a while. When he was recruited, he was a really good pass rusher, which I think we'll probably see more glimpses of this year. But in general, I do think he brings something special to the table athletically. The one area that he just has been lacking, it's just that football savvy part of it. And that's what Dylan Doyle had. Dylan Doyle could read plays before they happened. And that's the next step for Matt Jones. Can his football IQ and the ability to read plays and fill gaps, can that improve enough this season to where he's consistently solid instead of just having moments where you see the flashes?
Yeah. If you go back to whenever he first got on campus, Matt Rule was still at Baylor, and Matt Rule, raved about his instinct. So whenever he saw a play happen, he would get there. That happened in high school. That was happening when he was first on campus at Baylor. But I think what he's had to truly work on to be his best version is understanding his reads and where he's taking his first step. Dylan Doyle, first step was rarely the wrong one. He was going to be that first step. So even though he might not have been faster physically than Matt Jones, he was faster mentally, and he was always there to make a play. And I think we talk about Terrell Bernard and how good Terrell Bernard was. He made Dylan Doyle's life a lot easier. And I think that for the same reason, Keaton Thomas playing next to Matt Jones, you hope both these guys stay healthy so they can play next to each other. But you hope that he can have that same type of impact for Matt. And Dylan, I think his junior year it would have been in 21, and his really anytime that he played statistically, he didn't have these outlandish numbers, nothing compared to what Matt had last year at 11 half tackles for loss. But a lot of that was because those numbers were going to Terrell Bernard. And I think Keaton could have that same type of impact. Matt can play more free. Keaton's going to make more plays, but as a tandem, as a duo, they're going to be much better individually working together as a unit. That's my thought, my opinion.
Right. I think that you mentioned that Terrell Bernard made Dylan Doyle's life easier. I also think you could say the same about the flip side of that, because
Sure.
I think Dave Aranda trusted Dylan Doyle enough to where he could let Terrell Bernard be Terrell Bernard and blitz and get into the backfield, because there was so much stability with Doyle in the middle of that defense. You could really trust it. And I think they have been lacking that. So a lot of times their blitzes just don't even come close to getting home. And then you're just left on islands. And that happened a lot last year. And so I think that's a key part of this, right? If Matt Jones can really take that step to the next level, be good in coverage, be really solid against the run to where they're able to move Keaton Thomas all around the formation, bring him on blitzes from outside. You could see him outside, blitzing off the edge. You could see him inside blitzing. You could just move him in different ways. And I think that would be huge for him, but it will require Matt Jones taking a big step forward in order to unlock all of that potential that Keaton Thomas has.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a safety net behind him, you want the safeties, the true safeties, to be able to play free and not have to worry about that. So you need a middle linebacker. And I think that's what's encouraging about Matt playing a middle linebacker position. He's athletic enough that he can clean some stuff up that a less athletic guy would not be able to, but he has to be mentally ready to do that. I think he's going to be able to given his opportunities to be disruptive, but I think you're right. You have a guy with Keaton, you have the edge guys, Garmin, Steve Linton, those guys are going to be able to make plays. So whereas Matt last year, he was making plays behind the line of scrimmage consistently. Now I think this year, he's not going to be more reserved by any means, but I think he's going to have the opportunity to just sit back and truly play the position, because he was one of their better playmakers last year. Now I think it kind of gears more towards Keaton or one of the edge guys.
He was, and I do think he will still have opportunities as a pass rusher as well at times too. When Dave Aranda likes to, sprinkle in where the blitzes are coming from and things like that, I think he'll get some opportunities and potentially thrive in those opportunities. I remember, was it 2022? You and I talked about this a lot, Colt, but Baylor went on the road to face Texas the last game of the year, and they played that game without Matt Jones. Yeah. And Baylor was up. I believe they were up in the fourth quarter even.
They were.
And then I think Texas ran the ball like 20 times in a row, and Baylor had no answer for it. And a big part of that was because Matt Jones didn't play in that game. And I think that was probably the one game where you look back to and go, wow, man, Matt Jones is actually a pretty impactful player and someone that they truly did miss in that specific game. And I think that's a reason why he continues to be a guy that's a leader for this team, continues to be a guy that Dave Aranda trusts, relies on, because he knows what that defense does look like without him.
Follow Baylor Plus and Sikkim 365 today on X, Instagram, and Facebook, and sign up for the new premium content bundle. For the monthly price of $17.99, a $5 per month savings, Baylor fans can access the full offerings that both platforms offer: the long-form storytelling, video, and all-access behind-the-scenes content of Baylor Plus, and the premium news, analysis, and forums of Sikkim 365. Sign up today on either platform.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and tell your friends about us. Catch Colt and I on Inside Baylor Sports every weekday. You can also watch the video version free over at BaylorPlus.com or the official Baylor Athletics YouTube channel.
Yeah, you go back to that game specifically. Gabe Hall returns a fumble for a touchdown early in the fourth quarter. They're up, and you're thinking, dude, like, they had been struggling. I think they were at 6-4 at that point, maybe 6-5. Maybe they had lost the TCU game, something along those lines. Like, hey, they're going to finish this on a high note. Texas has had a lot of momentum, but now here Baylor is at the beginning of the fourth quarter. They have all the momentum, and then just deflated because Bijan Robinson, whoever else they had at running back at that time, it was, I think from our perspective, awful to watch. But then if you're a Texas fan, you're thinking they just take full advantage of Baylor being weak and a little bit slow at that linebacker position. But you're right. I mean, that Matt would have had in that fourth quarter alone, if they would have attempted to do that with Matt there, maybe he's not making every play at the line of scrimmage, but he would have had a lot of tackles in that game. And just from the way that they try to scheme it. And so I think that you go back to that game 2 years ago, he was a junior, actually senior last year, now a super senior. If he can figure out how to stay on the field, he's going to have those tackled numbers. You want the other guys, in my opinion, to stack up the tackles for loss, be disruptive. But like you said, he's going to have some opportunities to do it. I just don't think they're going to rely on him as heavily as they would have last year.
Right. And they have more options, with Keaton Thomas and the stars that they're going to be playing, whether it's Kendrick Simpkins or Carl Williams. I think they're going to bring a variety of guys. I even could see them bringing safeties blitzing as well. But I do think there's going to be a lot of different packages. And I know Keaton is the name that we're definitely going to talk about, but there's another transfer that has been making some waves at the linebacker position, who I also think can be utilized in a nice pass rushing way and in coverage.
Who is it?
Ra Dilworth, of course.
Right. Well, you kind of left me hanging there. I was like, who is the other one?
Well, we're going to get to him in a second. But yeah, Ra is a guy that Dave Aranda's mentioned actually twice this fall camp, which is fascinating. And he was a guy who they brought in to be the primary backup at will, but also just be a specialty guy, right? For packages and different things they were trying to do. A little bit undersized, but very athletic, was a former 4-star recruit, went to North Carolina. Things didn't work out, transferred to ECU. And now, again, he's a guy that's put himself in position to truly be in the two deep and potentially be impactful for this group.
Yeah, so he's a guy that's coming in as a little light for a will linebacker position. So there's some speculation that maybe he's playing star. Maybe they're trying to find another guy there that was playing more of a safety position. But no, they wanted him specifically at will, primarily so when it's 3rd and long and maybe Keaton can't be on the field, that he's able to go out there and run with the slot receiver, run with the tight end, and give them a little bit more flexibility, rather than having to rely on a heavier set Brooks Miller playing will linebacker if Keaton can't go. You want Keaton in coverage, he can do it, but Raw gives them that extra component for depth. And I think that's just one more area of saying this defense truly address needs. You don't know if it's going to pan out, but now Raw is being discussed by Dave Aranda as a guy who's making plays and is going to play this fall that maybe we didn't necessarily expect. I mean, I think 3 months ago, I wouldn't have said I expect him to be a contributor, but it sounds like he's going to be now.
Definitely. And I think you could even see situations where they take Matt Jones off the field, and then you got Keaton Thomas and Ra for coverage situations. And that's a very athletic duo to have in coverage. And so that's very intriguing as well. I just think in general, this group definitely added the pieces that they needed to. And I know we probably need to dive into Keaton specifically, because I do think there's a lot to it. And it's one of those things where you see a guy truly ascending and you see a guy just being talked about regularly. It perks your ears up. It should be just one of those things where it's like, oh, he's going to be really good. And I think from Dave Aranda's perspective, when he talks about a linebacker in this way, it speaks even more volumes about the kind of player that he is.
Merry Christmas. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you watch him play, and we've talked about him before. I think in a recent podcast, I don't remember which episode it was, but he came from West Virginia to a junior college. But he left West Virginia because they were viewing him as a safety, and he's like, no, I'm not a safety. I'm going to be too big. Like, let me go get reps somewhere that I can actually play the position I'm going to. And he bet on himself that he was a linebacker and not a safety. And now he is here, and he is 6'2", 230 pounds. If you watch him run, and I know we see very small glimpses at practice, but he is speed-wise in these drills that they're running, and maybe because he's going 100 miles an hour or 100% all the time compared to the other guys, which is great in and of itself, but he just kind of floats a little bit differently than the other guys. That's no disrespect. There's just, you can kind of tell there's something different about them. And you want to see that with guys because that means there is something different. Maybe they're a potential NFL starter, right? They have that athletic ability to do it. I'm not saying Keaton is that, but if they stand out, they have that ability. And I watched him in a brief window, and they were doing tackling drills on a sled, not individual work. But I mean, he just crushed into this thing 100 miles an hour. I'm like, just no fear. And not that they keep reverting to this, but like, not that other guys weren't doing it, but he was just impressive doing it. And once you see this guy for the first time, we didn't get to see him in a spring game. We didn't get to see him in spring practice to speak of. But once you see him in a game, I think we're going to see how fast that he really is. And you have receivers at Big 12 Media Day. Ketron Jackson said he's fast. And that's receivers who are also very fast that have been praised for their speed, talking about his speed.
Right. And he talked about how, Ketron was saying he would catch the football and then, Keaton's right there to tackle him. And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, Ketron plays outside receiver. So you're talking about really just running sideline to sideline at a very high level. And I think that's what Keaton definitely will bring: a lot of athleticism, a lot of speed. Last year in JUCO ball, he had 107 tackles, 10 for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 interceptions. Yeah. I think my biggest question for him is going to be the sack numbers. Because I do think Baylor is going to rely on him some in that area. And he didn't really show it during his year at JUCO ball, and he wasn't really asked to show it. And so my question is, does that take time? Or is it something that he just, because of the way he plays, it's going to be very easy and seamless for him to get into the backfield and make plays? That's one question mark that I have. Also, he hasn't played linebacker for very long. That's another, yeah. So that's another realistic thing that we have to ask ourselves. But I also believe that, again, I trust Dave Aranda with linebackers, and the way that they've talked about him going to Big 12 Media Days, him really being counted on as a leader, I think it speaks volumes about kind of where he is at. This is also a guy who held offers from Arkansas, Mississippi State, Cal, Colorado, Cincinnati, West Virginia, SMU, NC State. Tons of Power 4 offers, tons of really strong football programs wanted him, but Baylor was able to end up getting him. And I actually think we've talked about a lot of guys, and there might be a few guys who could potentially be breakout players, could potentially be all conference guys. But I think Keaton is probably the first one that we've gotten to where I'm like, I think Keaton can absolutely be an all Big 12 type linebacker this season.
Yeah, and he's going to be put in positions to succeed and get those numbers. Where we talk about the defensive line, you don't always get that productive. Coaches can see the impact, but maybe you don't get the production for the media to vote on you as an all Big 12 type of player, or you don't get it from the coaches because they're just looking at numbers. But these guys, if they are capable and the guys around them can play well, I would say Matt Jones and Keaton, numbers-wise, those aren't going to be an issue. It's going to be the consistent down to down. How reliable are you? I think both of them have the capability. Just like every position on this defense right now, there's so many new faces. You got to figure out, where does everyone meet their potential? No, but who does, and how does it impact the defense? Keaton, I think I'm with you. I think he's going to be the one that you know what you're getting with him, and he's going to go out and make plays. I think because of the fact that they talk about him being so much of a leader and being so dialed in every single time he hits the field, the expectations have to be that he's going to play at a high level every single time. There's not going to be blunders where he's not giving 100% or he makes a crucial mistake. Not that he won't make mistakes, but how often do they happen? I'm excited to watch him. I think that if you talk about figuring out who your next quote Terrell Bernard is for Dave Aranda, this is the closest thing that they've had really since before and after athletically, and just having the instincts of being able to do that. Because let's not forget, Terrell Bernard wasn't this overwhelming specimen. He was a 6'1", 230-pound linebacker, could run pretty well, but just had great football instincts. I would say from a physical attribute, Keaton surpassed what Terrell was. Now it's about putting it together on the football field at this level. That's what Terrell did. Keaton hasn't done it yet, but I do think he has the potential to.
It's definitely the mental side because Terrell Bernard just mentally was on another level. It just was spectacular to watch. Again, it's similar to what you said with Dylan Doyle. His first step was always the right step. And so I do think there will be some growing pains with Keaton at times. I just think that naturally when you are playing a position, you haven't been playing it that long, you're going to be put in uncomfortable situations at times that probably will lead to some sort of big plays for opposing offenses, but I think that will all be made up for with his athleticism and the big plays and the havoc plays that he will make this year. There's questions here, but I think overall, Keaton's very athletic and definitely a guy that has a ton of upside for this linebacker core. And if he really hits his peak outcome, then I think this unit will be really, really strong.
Yeah. The good news with him is that he has 3 years. He's a sophomore right now. Even though it's much praise we're giving him right now, he is only a sophomore. So he has room to grow. But in this situation, for a team that's trying to get back to the postseason, you need all of these pieces, the majority of these pieces that they brought in to hit. You need your playmakers to make plays immediately. You can't wait on them to make plays when you're trying to get back to the postseason. And so you hope that it doesn't come in massive waves where all of your new guys are having issues at the same time. You want them to be sporadic because they're going to be those issues at times. One of the issues potentially could be depth. There's a lot of talk about the front two being unproven. The guys behind them are even more so less unproven. We talked about Raw, but 2-3 guys, Jeremy Evans, Carmelo Jones, Brooks Miller being that next wave of guys behind there. You look at Brooks Miller being the older senior guy. He's back. I don't know that Brooks in an every down situation is going to be the answer, but I think that's why they brought in Raw. I think with Jeremy Evans and Carmelo Jones, you have 2 prospects that are coming along in the system. And we saw them a little bit last year with injuries. I don't know which of those guys that I would project or predict to be next man up at this stage. It looks like it might be Jeremy Evans. They're both sophomores. I think they're both very good prospects. It's just which one takes that next step for this season. And I don't even think that guarantees them anything for the future, even if they are the number 2 guy this year.
Right. I think that Jeremy Evans has kind of taken over that Mike linebacker role as the primary backup. I think he gives them a safer floor and just is going to be a guy that's going to work really hard and is going to, watch game tape and really kind of just figure it out because his football IQ is there and all of those things. I think with Carmelo, it's the upside. And honestly, I mean, if this team, comes out this year and let's just say if something happened to Matt Jones and if Carmelo ends up being the guy the rest of the year and if he hits, Carmelo could be a very special football player. We've seen glimpses of it, but he really is a guy who I'm excited about his potential. It just hasn't all come together yet for him. So for that reason, I would say that I think Jeremy Evans is probably the primary backup there. I think Ra Dilworth is probably the primary backup at will. And then Brooks Miller gives them just kind of an experienced piece in case everything falls apart and you just need a guy who can go out there and just kind of be solid enough. I think that's what kind of Brooks's role is. But outside of that, you're exactly right. It's unproven. Not a lot of, big plays, not a lot of, quote unquote star power in the group to kind of talk about. But I do think it is intriguing. It's an intriguing depth group. It's just not one that I think we have a ton of confidence in quite yet.
Yeah. I haven't looked at the snaps numbers. Obviously Matt Jones far and away on this group, Mike linebacker or Will linebacker has the most experience. Then it would be Brooks, obviously. I'm talking at this level, the Big 12 football, Power 4 conference football, that's going to be your 2 guys by far and away. Raw has played a little bit. Keaton obviously hasn't played any at this level. He is out of junior college. He did start at West Virginia, but he didn't have any snaps there.
Yeah.
Josh White has played, which we haven't mentioned him. Yeah. Kind of the special teams guy, like super fast. I don't think he's going to equate into the depth chart at this juncture, especially what we heard about Jeremy Evans being the backup Mike. I think that just kind of shows where that's trending. There's just not a lot of snaps there. And that's overall, keep harping on this, but so many unknowns, so much potential, so many unknowns. What hits, what doesn't hit. The staff has to figure out what's working, what's not working for the entire defense, not just this position, but there's so many guys that they just are counting on becoming hits that we're not going to know until they take to game one against Tarleton. And really, obviously, beyond that, like if they're struggling against Carleton, that will be an indicator. But if they go in and beat them by 30 points, we're still not going to know a lot about every single one of these guys. It's going to be Utah. It's going to be the Colorado game. It's going to be, Air Force, obviously, too. We saw what happened a couple of years ago against Air Force.
Absolutely. I think one more name I just wanted to mention, just because I'm intrigued by his potential in the future, is true freshman Kylan Reed, 4-star prospect that they added. He's also in the linebacker group, running with the third string right now. Not a guy that I think will factor into the equation this year, but is a guy that, you go into next year, and I think he could be a guy to watch going forward. He was a really intriguing prospect and one that chose Baylor over a number of big time offers. So he's a guy that's squarely on my radar as well for the future of this position. But you're right, lots of questions here, but I think the good news is that the starting 2 guys very much solidified and have been solidified since the spring. And I think the staff feels really good about what they have with Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas while they're trying to build the depth for the guys around them.
All right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thank you so much for listening. For Grayson Grundhoefer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great rest of the week, and make sure you tune in tomorrow and Sick 'em Bears.